Part 64. A Sledgehammer Breaks into Pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 631. Looking down from the top. Today's Golden City is bustling with people. Today is the opening day of Golden City, and not many big guys are eligible to receive invitations. But this is not a factor that affects the flow of people in the Golden City, because people who have not received the invitation letter can also enter the Golden City Entertainment today. It's nothing more than receiving an invitation letter, which gives you more face. People like Admiral Sengoku can just meet with Orgrim. What are the specific ribbon cutting and opening ceremonies? Orgrim had no interest in participating at all. In the morning, Tetsalo had already completed these processes in a live broadcast around the world as the general manager of the Golden City. Then, Belmir almost beat Aegean to death, but I think something will definitely happen between the two of them. Perhaps it is because of the height of Noki and I that we became the constraints of Belmir, making her unable to. I must find a way to pursue my own happiness. This is also one of the reasons why I went to sea. Najajao must also understand that it won't be too long before they move to Avalon together. Okay, although I haven't been to Avalon yet, when Aegean finds out that Belmir is leaving, he will definitely not be able to help but confess his love, and Belmir will definitely agree. Ha 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 ha, I'm really a genius. Nami stood next to Orgrim, telling her story in high spirits. Orgrim was eating a peeled orange in his hand, and Queen Stussy was also sitting next to Orgrim. Beside them, two people were laughing and listening to Nami's story. That's true. You two little guys have indeed become a constraint on Belmir to some extent. After all, she is a good mother, Orgrim said with a smile. Nami is a very popular little girl. It was as if she could be friends with anyone. She had only been here for 2 days, and not only did she not become estranged from Orgrim because of not seeing each other for many years, but on the contrary, she had also established a good relationship with the people around Orgrim. The Sphinx is even more kissable. Even Queen Stussy likes Nami, a sunny little girl. As for the relationship between Orgrim and Nami, Queen Stussy did not suspect anything or worry about anything. First of all, the reason why Orgrim values Nami is very simple, that is, Nami is a truly talented navigator, absolutely world-class, or even the top level. Although there is no verification now, Queen Stussy still trusts Orgrim very much in this matter. Orgrim is not the kind of person who likes to be secretive in the relationship between men and women. If he really had something with Nami, he would definitely not hide it from himself. What's more, Orgrim is really nothing. When he met Nami in the East China Sea, Nami was still a child. Stussy didn't think Orgrim was so crazy. After that, for so many years, Aaron has been in the East China Sea, and Orgrim has never been there. How could the two of them have anything? As for the future? Her Lady Queen is no longer worried about the future. Anyway, she has never been able to control these matters in Orgrim. Nami is not qualified either. It threatens her. Not everyone can be like Hancock. However, Orgrim has done quite well in these aspects. With his power, status, and strength, he can definitely get more, and even have no scruples, but Orgrim has not let himself go. Although you haven't been to Avalon yet, we will return to Avalon after the incident in the Golden City is over. At that time, we will take you to Avalon to have a good experience. It is much more powerful than the Golden City. Place Her Lady Queen said with a smile. Orgrim nodded, and then said yes, let Stussy take you to Avalon when the time comes. And you? Won't you go back? Nami asked curiously. Me? Orgrim smacked his lips, then shook his head and said not for the time being. I will probably go directly to the Holy Land Marijoa from here to meet the 5 old stars. I have something to talk to them about. 5 old stars? The highest power in the world? Nami asked in surprise. Certainly. Orgrim said matter-of-factly. Aren't you a pirate? Can a pirate meet the 5 old stars? Nami was dumbfounded. These things seemed to be completely beyond her imagination. Gee ha 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 ha, don't think of me as an ordinary pirate, okay? I am the strongest pirate in the world, so what about the 5 old stars? Don't they still have to discuss some things with me? If they stand at the pinnacle of order, then I stand at the pinnacle of chaos and darkness. This makes sense, doesn't it? Orgrim laughed. His tone was quite confident. This, how to say, Nami was a little shocked, but also a little relieved, and finally said, well, maybe this is the world. After all, the marshals of the Navy will come to attend the opening of Golden City. At the same time, several Navy warships slowly sailed into the port of Golden City. After the ladder of the warship was lowered, the Warring States Marshal, wearing a great cloak of justice, slowly walked down from the ship. Behind him were Jun and Fujitora from the G-5 Navy. As for the Admiral of the Navy, he did not come. As soon as the Warring States Marshal boarded the port began to boil. A large number of reporters seemed to be waiting for him, their flashlights all lit up, and they frantically took pictures of the Navy bosses like Senguo. Look, it's true, the Admiral is here. It seems that Golden City will definitely become a reliable neutral zone. The world government has indeed recognized this project. The Warhammer pirates are so awesome. Both the Sea Overlord and the Pirate Overlord recognize this place. It seems that this place will really become a refuge in the future. The premise is that you have to have money. Warring States frowned slightly, feeling a little impatient. Although today is the opening day of the Golden City, he did not come very early, which can be said to be late. I thought this would attract less attention. Pay attention. The result is good. These reporters are really patient. Now, they clearly don't want to support Orgrim, so they have to stand now. But soon, the security team at the port quickly dispersed all these reporters who were like flies. Although Sengoku was the Marshal of the Navy, and the Navy also brought many people this time. But Sengoku has no law enforcement power here. This is a place beyond the control of naval power and is neutral. District, all under the management of Golden City. Marshal of the Warring States period, welcome to the Golden City. Tizalo was wearing a pink suit, with a smile on his face, and he greeted Marshal Sengoku and others sincerely. Marshal Sengoku looked at Tizalo with a complicated expression. Although Tizalo is a Warhammer, a member of the pirate group, but this guy has never done any unforgivable bad things so far. He is a rare good citizen among the Warhammer pirates. The reason why his expression is a little complicated is because of Tizaro. It's so profitable. He did a great job with the Avalon Dark Bank, and now, he has created a Golden City. Warring States knows that the Golden City project, from beginning to end, including the idea, is almost all Tizalo's. It was done. Orgrim and Doflamingo just gave some marginal help. The Warhammer pirates already had enough financial resources, and with the addition of Tetsalo, it's even more terrifying. How great would it be if this guy was discovered and recruited by the Navy earlier? Maybe, he will become the person who opens up a new way for the Navy. Financial independence. Alas, it's not possible. Even if we can really capture talents like Tetsalo, the Navy may not be able to retain them. There is a high probability that they will be intercepted by the world government, right? Without speaking, the Warring States Marshal just nodded in agreement. However, given his status, Tetsalo could not get angry with such a performance and could only endure it. At this moment, Jun, who was following the Warring States Marshal, exclaimed, "Drag." That's right, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Chief Laozi, Draco, also smiled at this time. Walked out of the port. Jun, Mr. Sengoku, it's been a long time no see. How are you? Drag asked with a smile. His tone seemed like he was greeting a friend he hadn't seen for a long time. There was no feeling of hostility at all. Jun looked at Drag with a complicated look, and finally nodded. But he didn't speak. There was some reminiscence in the eyes of the warring states marshal. He hadn't seen Drag for a long, long time, and it seemed that he couldn't even remember it for so long. It seemed that he left Dalag without saying goodbye. After entering the Navy, he has never had any contact with Drag, right? This current enemy, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, was his most valued junior back then. He had also thought about training him if possible. Become an admiral, even, admiral or something. But all this finally disappeared. Not only did Darag fail to become an excellent and reliable naval admiral, he actually became the biggest enemy and fundamental enemy of their world government. It's been many years indeed. I haven't seen you. Darag, you have changed a lot, the warring states marshal said softly. People change. Darag smiled and said. Darag, why are you here? Jun asked in a deep voice. Darag smiled, glanced at the bustling golden city, and said, if I remember correctly, this is a neutral zone. According to the cooperation treaty between the world government and the Golden City, here, whether it is the Navy or the CP agency, all members and organizations affiliated with the world government have no law enforcement rights here, so, why can't I come? Do you want to work with Orgrim? You shouldn't be such a person. Where is your justice? Have you given up on justice? Jun asked again. Ha 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 ha, due to our differences in stance, our justice cannot be understood by each other after all. But let alone me, aren't you here too? The righteous navy and the evil pirates are here, it's fun, and it doesn't matter if I add one more Revolutionary Army member. Darag laughed. After laughing, Darag said with a hint of meaning in his eyes, Jun, you have changed. This is not beyond my expectation. Back then, when I was still in the Navy, I knew that you, Kuzan, and Sakaski were all different, G-5. It suits you quite well. Jun frowned slightly and whispered, no matter what, I am still a Marine. Yeah, you're still a Marine, this is really happy. I feel relieved to see you are still in the Navy. Darag said some strange words. However, neither the warring states marshal nor Jun himself could understand what Darag meant. Darag did not explain anything. He realized it many, many years ago. One thing is not possible in the Navy, at least not in the Navy that is like a domestic dog. And his choice is to leave and find his own justice. At first, he also thought about whether to let only Jun becomes his companion. Because in his opinion, Jun is the person who can understand him best among the Navy at the same time, right? Kuzan can't do this, Sakaski can't do it, and Polusala can't do this. Nyo couldn't do it either. But in the end, he still couldn't make Jun his companion. And in the future, Drago seemed to be able to see some of it. This era is an era where the Navy and pirates compete, and the final outcome of this era is whether the Navy wins or loses. The Navy will usher in a new change. I'm afraid that even the martial warring states has not yet reacted to this change, right? Darag, on the other hand, believes that Jun, now in the G-5 Navy, is the only future he sees in the Navy. Not Sakaski, not Kuzan, not Porosalino. None of the three admirals of the Navy were. Darag, in the future, what I see is Jun. However, he is not sure whether this future will really come. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 632. The first half of the Grand Line, on the island of the Queen of Spring. In an ordinary tavern, a group of pirates were sitting. This group of pirates is the red-haired pirates. Red-haired Shanks, because of the appearance of Crocodile, he not only broke an arm in the New World, but also messed up all his plans. He was completely defeated in the New World, and even now he has not recovered. The red-haired pirates did not successfully reach the top of the New World as he planned. There was no increase in strength, and Katakuri and others were absorbed into the pirate group. On the contrary, in the New World, heavy losses were also suffered. In the end, the biggest winner in the Totland Sea was the Warhammer Pirates, a pirate group that had no involvement in almost the entire process. Everything he did was either making wedding clothes for Orgrim or Crocodile. This hit Shanks very hard, and he was a little discouraged. After leaving the New World, he didn't know what to do. The entire red-haired pirate group just wandered around with nothing to do. Recently, they came to the Queen of Spring Island. The atmosphere in the red-haired pirate group was quite good at this time and did not seem oppressive. Many officers and crew members were chatting in the tavern. However, Shanks did not participate. He sat quietly at the bar, holding a wine glass with his only remaining hand and drinking alone. Different from the high-spirited people in the New World, Shanks at this time has an unkempt beard and a bit dirty. He has not been groomed for a long time, and he looks a bit down and out. After drinking all the wine in the glass, Shanks casually placed the glass on the bar. The bartender inside quickly filled a glass of strong liquor without asking. Belch, Shanks burped. Golden City, he murmured softly. Spring Queen Island can be considered a large island in the first half of the Grand Line. The infrastructure is also relatively developed and naturally has live broadcast equipment. Not long ago, he just watched the live broadcast of the opening of Golden City. The opening of the Golden City symbolizes that the Warhammer Pirates have taken a further step in power. They have become stronger in the New World. Previously, I had been targeting Orgrim and working hard for my competitors, but no matter how hard I tried, it seemed that I could never catch up with Orgrim. Orgrim keeps winning, but he, like a joke, keeps losing. At this moment, he seemed to have understood what Captain Roger said when he was still on Captain Roger's ship. Living in the same era as Orgrim is both lucky and unfortunate. Fortunately, we can see Orgrim create legends and create an era. Unfortunately, perhaps all his contemporaries will be influenced by him. Covered by the light of. At that time, when Captain Roger said this, he was still a little regretful. He regretted that his health was not good and he could not see the scene. But I was not convinced at all, thinking that one day I would be able to defeat Orgrim. But in reality, they didn't just slap him, they simply pushed Shanks to the ground and beat him until his body was completely bruised. Unlucky? Yes, this is really unfortunate, living in the same era as you, Orgrim, Shanks murmured with a wry smile, and then picked up the wine glass that had just been filled on the bar, ready to drink some more. Just when Shanks put the glass to his lips, the door of the tavern suddenly opened. Was pushed away. The pirates in the tavern all looked at the door in surprise. After all, this tavern had been booked by their red-haired pirates. Although the red-haired pirates were defeated and retreated to the New World, they have arrived at the first half of the Grand Line, but no matter what, they still have the status of King Shishibukai. Compared with Orgrim and the others, the red-haired pirates are the losers. But for the rest of the people on the sea, they are still strong. There is no reason to be provoked in a place like this, right? Shanks also looked over, and then he was stunned. It was a figure wearing black noble clothes, wearing an aristocratic hat. His eyes are like hawks, full of sharpness. Just looking at each other can put people under great pressure. He is not very tall, and he is carrying a handful behind him, which makes him look a little funny. The black sword. It feels ordinary, but it has the aura of a strong man. The world's greatest swordsman, Jorikol Mihawk. The veteran leader of the Warhammer Pirates. I saw it was Mihawk. Behind the figure, the pirates of the red-haired pirate group did not speak. They all knew that although Mihawk was the leader of the Warhammer Pirates, he seemed to be somewhat involved with his own captain. Mihawk, as soon as Kay entered the door, he saw Shanks, who looked decadent. He frowned slightly and seemed a little dissatisfied. He didn't care whether the pub was booked and walked in directly. What you look like really surprises me and is so disappointing, Mihawk said without mercy. Then, without any courtesy, he sat down next to Shanks and said to the bartender at the bar, "A glass of wine." The bartender has always been the most discerning person among all walks of life. Therefore, the moment Mihawk entered the door, he had already recognized Mihawk. He thought that there might be a fight between dragons and tigers, but as a result, Mihawk, a member of the Warhammer Pirates, didn't seem to have any hostility. Not daring to delay anything, the bartender quickly went to pour Mihawk a drink. Shanks swallowed the drink and smiled somewhat self-deprecatingly. Said, "A loser should naturally look like a loser. What? Are you here to mock me? Or do you want to compete with me?" Mihawk was still not polite and said directly, "I'm not bored enough to come all the way to mock you. As for sparring or something, that was my original plan, but now, forget it. You not only lost a hand, your sword, it's not as sharp as before. Are you looking down on me?" Shanks suddenly became angry. While roaring, he slammed the wine glass in his hand on the bar. In an instant, the wine glass exploded, and the remaining wine inside splashed everywhere. Mihawk remained the same. He was calm, looking at Shanks, who was like an angry lion, and stretched out his hand to wipe the drink splashed on his face. All the members of the red-haired pirate group also looked here. But they did not take action. He looked at them quietly, with somewhat complicated eyes. Shanks seemed to have found an outlet in Mihawk, and roared, "It's true that I am a loser, I am so despicable, and cooperated with the Navy, I cooperated with the pirates, connected to Katakuri, and put all my reputation and future on that bet. I lost everything, even my arm. I was never favored by anyone. Crocodile, who didn't even notice, took advantage and was kicked out of the new world in embarrassment. Poor, right? Sad, right? If you want to laugh at me or look down on me, just laugh or look down on me, but, Mihawk, from beginning to end, did I do anything wrong? Didn't you make a mistake? Pirates, isn't that how they should be? Am I wrong?" At this time, Shanks was like a lion forced to a dead end. He was irritable, and had lost confidence in the future and the current situation. He was full of the aura of destruction. Mihawk did not. He opened his mouth and looked at him like that, with some regret in his eyes. He picked up the wine glass on the table and took a sip of wine quietly. But it was just a sip, and there seemed to be no wine left in his mouth. After swallowing, Mihawk raised his hand and poured the wine glass in his hand at Shanks. In one move, he poured it on Shanks' head. The scarlet wine was like blood, which made Shanks sigh. On the stub-bled face, flowing freely. "Is this what you want to say? Then you are really far behind Crocodile, let alone Orgrim. You are really a complete loser. In terms of swords, if it is too strong, it will break easily. In terms of people, the same is true. Red hair, your heart is higher than the sky, but I don't understand this truth," Mihawk said softly. After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Shanks to say anything. He put down the wine glass in his hand, stood up from the bar, and left without any intention of staying. Just like that, he came in a hurry. He left in a hurry and disappeared into the tavern. Shanks stood there quietly, letting the scarlet wine drip from his face. The red-haired pirates did not chase Mihawk, that bastard who dared to throw wine in their captain's face. As if these things never happened, they turned around and started drinking again with a smile. "Ha ha ha," Shanks suddenly laughed. He did not continue to sit on the bar, but leaned against the bar, gradually sliding down and sitting on the floor. The tip of his tongue stuck out and licked the wine stains at the corner of his mouth. His wet hair covered his sight. "Heart is higher than the sky? Yes, my heart is as high as the sky, but I am not even as good as Crocodile." Shanks sat on the floor and muttered to himself. Crocodile, nearly 20 years ago, challenged Whitebeard, was betrayed by his crew and subordinates, and had one of his arms cut off by Whitebeard. He left the new world like a lost dog. his ambition ended seemingly in embarrassment. Being underestimated and slandered by the world, carrying the name of the good-for-nothing king under the Shishibukai, he has been working quietly in Alabasta. In the past 20 years, the world had humiliated him, despised him, and had constant rumors, but Crocodile never responded. Just pretend that none of these exist. The forbearance of the past 20 years, once it broke out in the New World, it had the potential to reach the sky. It was really not unfair to lose to him. Now, I am just the same as Crocodile. No, it should be said that he is better than Crocodile. At least, his partners did not betray him, an incompetent captain, right? Broken an arm and rolled out of the New World. But what are you doing? Living in confusion, losing confidence. I am really not as good as Crocodile. Your sword is not as sharp as before. What my hawk just said appeared in Shank's mind again. Yes, he is rusty. It's not scary to have a broken arm, but the scary thing is that the whole person is rusty. My hawk, he is right, as with a knife, it is easy to break if it is too strong, and the same is true for people. He seems to be smooth and despicable, going in and out of the New World, cooperating with the Navy, cooperating with pirates, and planning those messy conspiracies. But, I am exactly the hard one. He, Shanks, never thought of bowing his head like Crocodile. But if you don't lower your head, how can you raise it? Crocodile bowed his head as soon as he entered the New World. Back then, Orgrim also bowed his head as soon as he entered the New World. But now, Orgrim holds his head high, and Crocodile will surely hold his head high in the future. I was the only one who never bowed my head, but the look of him raising his head in embarrassment was really sad and ridiculous. It's true, my heart is higher than the sky and my life is thinner than paper. It's time to lower my arrogant and ridiculous head, Shanks whispered to himself. Then, he suddenly asked Jesus Bulletin, tell me, what is the purpose of lowering your head, Jesus? Bulletin, who was drinking, put down the wine glass in his hand and turned to look at Shank, who was hanging his head. Si, smiled and said, does this need to be said? Captain, of course it's to raise your head to look more handsome. Ha 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 ha, Shanks burst out laughing. Then, he suddenly raised his head, his wet hair was flying a little, there was a smile on his lips, and there was no decadence in his eyes. Am I handsome enough like this? Of course, there is no man more handsome than you on the sea, Jesus Bulletin said without hesitation. At this moment, everyone in the red-haired pirate group understood that their captain was back. Welcome back, Captain, what do we do next? Lucky Lou asked with a smile. Shanks grinned and said softly with a smile, be a dog in the Navy, King Shishibukai, isn't that how it should be? Being a dog now is to be a wolf in the future. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 633. The elevator door opened gently without making any sound. Please, the goddess of luck, Bakara, stood in the elevator, made a gesture of invitation, and said softly. As soon as she finished speaking, Marshal Sengoku and Jun walked out. The 50th floor of the Black Pearl building. The highest area in the Golden City. After walking around the screen, you will see a large transparent floor. Under the one-way transparent floor-to-ceiling windows, it seems that the entire Golden City can be taken in, and the view is excellent. However, it is quiet here, and there are no unnecessary people. There was only Orgrim, with his back to Sengoku and Jun, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, seemingly admiring the prosperity of the city. Without looking back, Orgrim bit a cigar in his mouth and spoke softly. Said, you're welcome, sit down by yourself. Jun was really not polite, he sat directly on the sofa, reached out to pick up the teapot from the table, and poured himself a cup of tea. Then, he leaned back on the sofa and put his legs directly on the coffee table in front of the sofa. She naturally took out a pack of cigarettes from her full chest, took out one, bit it on her mouth, and lit her cigarette with the Orgrim lighter on the table. Marshal Sengoku did not sit down like Jun did. Instead, he slowly walked to Orgrim's side, fought side by side with him, and looked at the scenery outside the window. "How about it? Isn't the scenery great?" Orgrim suddenly asked. The Warring States Marshal glanced around the Golden City before he said, "It's very good." After that, neither of them spoke. After standing for a while, Orgrim slowly exhaled a puff of smoke and said, Warring States period, when did we first meet?" "Shampoo Islands," the Warring States Marshal answered without thinking. "Ah, it seems so. Thinking about it this way, it really happened many years ago," Orgrim said with a look of reminiscence on his face. "More than 20 years," the Warring States Marshal responded softly again. "Yes, more than 20 years. Orgrim nodded, and then with a smile on his lips he said, "In the past 20 years, I have done pretty well, right?" Marshal Warring States didn't answer anything directly this time, but stood quietly for a while. After a while, he shook his head helplessly and said, "Yes, you did a good job. As far as pirates are concerned, you are better than before. Rox is better than Roger, Shiki, and Newgate, and he does better than them all." Gee ha 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 ha, many people have said this, but I can only believe it when I hear it from your mouth. "It's really strange," Orgrim laughed. "After all, you are a pirate and I am a navy. Sometimes, the person who knows you best is often your opponent." Marshal of the Warring States period said so. "Yeah, do you understand me?" Orgrim asked again. Marshal Warring States turned his head and glanced at Orgrim, then shook his head and said, "I don't understand." "Gee ha 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 ha, you bastard, you really talked a lot of nonsense," Orgrim laughed and said. "Originally, I didn't have anything good to say to you." Marshal Warring States also suddenly smiled and said. After a slight pause, Marshal Warring States said again, "Before I came here, I thought you would say something to ridicule me like you did at Marigio." Orgrim exhaled a puff of smoke and then said, "It was different. At that time, I was in your territory. I could do whatever I wanted. This is my territory. You are guests after all. I am not stingy. To this extent." After finishing speaking, Orgrim turned around, waved his hand and said, "Sit down. Then take a seat. Anyway, maybe there will be no such opportunity again in the future." Marshal Warring States nodded. But after he finished speaking, he discovered that this seemed to be the first time he had such contact with pirates in his decades of naval career. Before, whether it was Roger or Shiji, or maybe it's that guy from Newgate. Although they have been fighting for a long time, many years, there has never been anything like this meeting with Orgrim. "If you want, you are always welcome to come to Golden City." Orgrim smiled and said. Then, he turned around and walked towards the sofa. "Jun, long time no see, eh? You are more beautiful. I like this bohemian style. Do you want to consider being my woman?" Orgrim looked at Jun's slender legs on the coffee table and couldn't help but said with a smile. Jun reached out and took out the cigarette he was biting at the corner of his mouth. He didn't mean to look for the ashtray at all, and casually placed it on the coffee table. It bounced on the ground. The sparks fell on the expensive carpet. "If you change your ways now, join my G-5 Navy, and serve as my adjutant for a period of time, I will consider giving you a chance to pursue me," Jun said softly with a wisp of smoke coming out of the corner of his mouth. "That gesture must be so sultry, so sultry. You, super you." Orgrim smiled, sat on the sofa, and said, "It's really too much. If you want to refuse, just refuse it properly. You have to make such a rude request." "Marshal Sengoku, can I apply to join the G-5 Navy?" Of course not. Marshal Sengoku was not polite at all and refused directly. Orgrim shrugged, then pouted at Jun and said, "Look, it's not that I don't want to be a good person, it's that the world doesn't allow it. That's really a pity. It seems that we are not destined to be together." Jun exhaled another stream of sultry smoke and said with a smile on his lips, "What a pity. To be honest, apart from Stussy, you are my favorite woman. If you change your request to something more normal, I might give it a try." Gee ha 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 ha. Orgrim laughed and said. Jun's heartbeat was a little faster. But on the surface, he still looked very calm. He sneered and said, "The words that came out of your mouth, Orgrim, I don't believe a word of it." Just as Orgrim admires Jun very much, from a man's perspective, Jun has feelings for Orgrim. The feelings created by so many years of obsession are quite complicated. However, Jun knew very well that there was no such possibility between him and Orgrim. He picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip before Orgrim said, "Originally, I had no plans to do this Golden City. I came, but for your sake, Marshal of the Warring States period, I came." "What you are saying is as if I am running the Golden City. Will you give me the dividends?" Marshal of the Warring States period curled up his lips and said. Do you want it? That's totally fine. I'm just afraid you won't accept it," Orgrim said with a smile. The Warring States Marshal did not take Orgrim's words. Orgrim smiled again, put down the teacup, looked into Sengoku Yuen's eyes, and asked softly, "Although it feels unlikely, I'm still going to ask." The Warring States Marshal also looked at Orgrim's eyes and said softly, "Ask." With a grin on his lips, Orgrim said with an evil smile on his face, "I said, can you, please let your navy quietly withdraw from the New World as you have done in the past? Ah, of course, if you really need it, you can let G-5 stay. Just like before, don't disturb anyone. After all, it's hard for me to do it when your navy comes to the New World like this." Whispering sound, the cigarette in the corner of Jun's mouth was biting a little tighter. The serious face of the Warring States Marshal also had a rare smile. "Orgrim, can you please disband the Warhammer pirates where you are? I promise, just like I did with the Roger pirates back then, as long as you retreat and do some face-saving work, I will never pursue your past crimes." "How? After all, it's hard for me to be a pirate like you," Marshal Warring States said with a smile. Orgrim reached out and grabbed his hair, looking a little helpless, and said, "It's really uncomfortable. It seems that we both have nothing in common on this issue. Isn't that natural? How is it possible that if I say a word, you will disband the Warhammer pirates, and how is it possible, if you say a word, our navy will withdraw from the New World?" Marshal of the Warring States period sneered. "In other words, there is no room for compromise between us, right?" Orgrim said softly. "There has never been this kind of room between you and me," Marshal Warring States also said softly. "Warring States period, do you really think your navy can defeat me in the New World?" Orgrim raised his chin, and his tone also brought a hint of arrogance. However, the Warring States Marshal didn't care about this. He stretched out his hand and scratched the goatee on his chin. He said with a smile, "How can you do it if you don't try it? After all, our navy seems to be quite strong." "Gee ha 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 ha, is this declaring war on me?" Orgrim laughed. No, this is just to say hello. Orgrim, my calligraphy is still very good. When that day comes, I will definitely write it in person." "I'm writing you a letter of challenge," the Warring States Marshal said with a smile. Orgrim naturally understood what he was insinuating. At the beginning, he wrote a letter of challenge to Newgate, and the final winner was him, Orgrim. What Warring States said, isn't it obvious enough? But Orgrim raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, "That is really the best, I will wait for you." Previously, there were rumors in the sea that this era would be as predicted by Morgans, an era of duel between navy and pirates. However, neither Orgrim nor Sengoku had responded directly before this kind of topic. Now, the leaders of the two major forces who are at the top of evil and the top of justice have finally put down their harsh words face to face. This era is the era of duel between heaven and earth. I will not discuss these with the Marshal of the Warring States period. It's over, no matter what happens, the Navy can't give in, and the same goes for Orgrim. Jun, are you interested in taking a tour with me? As if, dating, Orgrim tilted her head, looked at Jun, and invited with a smile. Jun slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. This time, she put out the cigarette in her hand in the ashtray on the table. Then he raised his head, looked at Orgrim and said, I spend money, but it's very powerful. Gee ha 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 ha, what a coincidence, I have nothing but money, Orgrim laughed. Putting his long legs on the table, Jun stood up from the sofa, took off the justice cloak on his shoulders, threw it into the arms of the Warring States Marshal, and patted the gold on his waist. Piloto said, then let's go. Orgrim also stood up, nodded to the Warring States Marshal with a smile and said, it's hard to come to the Golden City once, why not go and have fun? This time's consumption, I paid for you, Marshal of the Warring States period. If that guy from Uxiao knew about this, he would definitely regret it. He didn't come with us to see you, but instead went to play by himself, the Warring States Marshal smiled and said. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 634. Golden City is not only a casino, but also a comprehensive entertainment city. Almost all entertainment facilities are available. At the same time, wealthy people from all over the world will be welcomed here. Therefore, things like shopping must be arranged. There is a large supermarket covering a huge area, which houses almost all luxury brands in the world. At this time, in this super large high-end brand supermarket, Orgrim and Jun were walking inside with smiles. Today is the first day of opening of Golden City. The flow of people in the entire Golden City is actually quite large, but for this place, the flow of people is not much, even a little sparse. But this is normal. After all, the Golden City is too big. It might not be possible to complete the tour here without spending a week or two. The facilities inside are very complete. When most people come here, they first want to experience the entertainment facilities. On the contrary, this kind of shopping mall where brands gather together is not very attractive. For the top rich, you can buy these things anywhere, so there is no need to come here to see them on the first day. Jun has always seemed to have an obsession with Orgrim. It's unclear where this obsession comes from. Perhaps it was Orgrim's ruthless fighting style when they first met in the capital of Seven Waters. He defeated Jun at an extremely fast speed, shattering all her beauty and pride. If after that, Orgrim was out cold on the sea, there seems to be nothing left to say. But Orgrim is like a nightmare on the sea, constantly growing and getting stronger. It is so strong that even if the Navy headquarters puts all its strength into it, it may not be possible to win. During this slow and long period of time, Jun and Orgrim fought several times, but they all ended in failure. Eventually, an obsession formed. To this day, Jun himself can't explain clearly what kind of feelings he has towards the bastard Orgrim. Before, Orgrim was in the house and invited Jun to go on a date. In fact, it was just a casual mention. He never thought that Jun would agree. After all, Jun's attitude towards him was too obvious a few times before, and his disgust and hatred were not concealed at all. But to Orgrim's surprise, Jun agreed without saying a word. This surprised him, and he didn't know what Jun was thinking. But since Jun has agreed, Orgrim will naturally not back down. In the slightly empty shopping mall, Orgrim and Jun walk side by side. Perhaps if this scene were photographed by someone, it would definitely become big news that shocked the world. Because, the Navy's candidate for Admiral, the famous G-5 Lieutenant General Peach Yosagi in the New World, Jun, was holding Orgrim's arm very naturally, walking together like a close lover. "To be honest, I didn't expect that you would actually agree to go out with me," Orgrim said with a smile as he walked. "Although the benefits of the Navy are good, they are still not comparable to those of bastards like you. There are many things that I want to buy. Catching you, the culprit, can be regarded as punishing evil and promoting good." Jun held Orgrim's arm, looking at the intimacy, but the words in his mouth were merciless. Before Orgrim could speak, Jun took Orgrim's arm and walked into a store. The shopping guides in the store were stunned when they saw the figures of Orgrim and Jun. As a shopping guide in the Golden City, you naturally have to undergo strict training before coming. The first point is to remember the top figure on the sea, to avoid any collision. There is no doubt that Orgrim, as the master of the Golden City and the most powerful pirate in the world today, will certainly not be forgotten. Jun, as anew in the battle for world supremacy, the candidate for admiral, captured the Yonko Big Mom. In the New World for many years, the all-powerful G-5 Peach Rabbit is also famous. These two people are definitely big shots. But what do you think of these two people? It's not a combination that we can stand together and go shopping, right? A Navy admiral candidate, and a pirate emperor? This is ridiculous. If anyone had said such a fantasy before, the shopping guide would definitely not believe it, but now, she has seen it with her own eyes. Jun walked to a pink lady's handbag with Orgrim on his arm and asked, "How much does this cost?" The shopping guide then came back to his senses and quickly said, "The price is 3,200. 720,000 Baileys is this year's limited edition. Originally, we would not conduct any discount sales in our stores around the world, but Golden City is different. Within the first 3 days of Golden City's opening, all products in the store were discounted. 30% off, down is. No need to calculate the discount." Jun smiled and interrupted the shopping guide. After a slight pause, Jun asked, "How many colors are there in total?" 7 kinds, 7 colors, respectively. The shopping guide is also going to introduce it." Jun waved his hand and said, "Everyone pack it for me." As she said that, she glanced at Orgrim, tilted her head, and in a rare womanly manner, lightly opened her red lips and said, "Is that okay?" "Orgrim." Orgrim stretched out his hand and pinched Jun. Jun didn't dodge, he still looked at Orgrim like that. "Of course there is no problem, beautiful Miss Jun." Orgrim smiled and said. Then he turned to look at the beautiful shopping guide and said, "Charge it all to my account, pack it up and send it to the G-5 warship in the port." "Yes, Lord Orgrim." The shopping guide girl quickly agreed to the matter. As for keeping accounts and not keeping accounts, others don't have this qualification, but Orgrim definitely has it. Let alone keeping accounts, they just don't pay. So what can I do? But after thinking about it, Lord Orgrim would not do such a thing due to his integrity. Without stopping for anything else, after buying these, Jun took Orgrim and walked into a clothing store. After changing clothes several times in a row, Jun walked out of the fitting room. As I said again, he is handsome and smooth, and naturally looks good in anything he wears. At this time, Jun was wearing a black coat, style it's novel and doesn't look serious. On the contrary, it has a strong offensive look. It's perfect when paired with the gold pila hanging on her waist. "How?" Jun naturally walked around in front of Orgrim and asked softly. Orgrim sat on the sofa in the store, stretched out his hand to touch his chin, and praised, "Perfect, quite perfect, as expected. No matter what you wear, you will look beautiful. You should not be constrained by the justice of the Navy. You said the same thing about the previous items. Is it really not perfunctory?" Jun asked with a hint of suspicion on his brows. "Of course not," Orgrim said without hesitation. Jun nodded, turned to the shopping guide who was following him and said, "This piece, and the ones I tried just now, are packed in triplicate." Having said this, Jun turned to look at Orgrim again, with a bright smile on his face, and asked like a girl, is it okay? Orgrim. Orgrim's mouth curled up. He smiled and said, of course, just do as she said and charge it all to my account. After packing, send it to the warship G-5 in the port. Jun took over what Orgrim said. The smile on Orgrim's face became even bigger. Before, although he admired Jun, it was more of an appreciation for strong and beautiful women. Yes, the kind of appreciation that comes from a man's instinct. But now, he seems to really like Jun. Even he knows very well that this kind of love is destined to be meaningless. He can't give up anything for Jun. Jun, too, it is impossible to give up anything for him. But, so what? Is this the reason to suppress one's feelings? No, there is no need for a reason to like this kind of feeling, and there is no reason to suppress it. Isn't it a good choice to enjoy the happiness and joy of the present? As for the future, just leave it to the future. I walked around a few more shops. Jun was not polite to Orgrim at all. At first, he even asked about the price. In the end, whatever they liked, they packed it up directly. No need to ask about the price, everything was recorded in Orgrim's account. At this time, Orgrim was sitting on the sofa in a cosmetics store. Jun, on the other hand, was sitting in front of the makeup tester, holding a lipstick in his hand and coloring his lips. To be honest, Jun's lip color is very good, and a beauty of her level doesn't need to decorate herself like this at all. But it seems that women all have this nature, right? Staring at himself in the mirror, the lipstick in Jun's hand was a deep red color. It was painted on his lips, leaving a dazzling red that looked a little arrogant. She stopped what she was doing and stared blankly at herself in the mirror. Am I pretty? Jun suddenly asked. Orgrim sat on the sofa, stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, of course. I heard that there is the best hotel in the Golden City, Jun asked in an incoherent tone. Of course, this is the world's top entertainment city, and almost all of the world's top hotels are located here. Orgrim said with a smile. Let's go get a room. After hearing this, Jun suddenly said. Everyone in Orgrim was dumbfounded. He admitted that he was Jun's body. For the pursuit of beauty, he didn't have to hide anything. He looked at Jun, his eyes are so cruel. But he is not such a dishonest person. If he is greedy for something, he must do whatever it takes to get it. Now this kind of process, like a couple, is also ogres. What Mew enjoys. He also thought before that it was almost over. After leaving the supermarket, he and Jun will still part ways. He will continue to be the evil pirate he is, and Jun will continue to do the same. She is the messenger of justice. If one day they meet on the sea, then they will definitely fight each other without mercy, right? But so what? This feeling today will definitely not disappear, it will become one of the precious memories in the hearts of the two of them. This is enough, isn't it? But Orgrim never expected that Jun would be so bold and directly invite him to open a room. After being stunned for a moment, Orgrim immediately he nodded and said, okay. Every lady has made such a request. As a man, it would be ungentlemanly if he refused. I want to live in the most luxurious house. There was a smile on the corner of Jun's mouth, and the movement of applying lipstick in his hand started again. Good. Orgrim still said this. I want you not to go back, but to stay with me all night, Jun said again. Orgrim still said okay. Orgrim, good and evil, black and white, can really, Jun asked as if he couldn't bear it anymore. But she didn't even finish her words. Orgrim's tone was still so concise and steady, but he said very powerfully, you can't. Yes, Jun hesitated for a moment, then laughed and said, I think too much, but as long as today is enough, right? Right. Orgrim also smiled and said. This world, it's really cruel, yet beautiful, Jun filled in the last touch of lip color and whispered softly. Yes, Cruel, yet beautiful, Orgrim also responded softly. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 635. The top floor of the top hotel in Golden City. Although it is not as high as the Black Pearl building, you can still see most of the scenery of the Golden City. Today is the first day of business. Orgrim and Jun are naturally the first guests here. At this time in this room, Orgrim was sitting on a sofa. In front of him, there was a table. Not far away, in the bathroom, the sound of rushing water could be heard. Orgrim is sitting here with a complicated mood. With a click, he lit the cigarette he was holding in the corner of his mouth. He rarely smoked cigarettes, which Beckman liked, but he preferred cigars. I don't carry this kind of thing with me. This cigarette is from Jun on the table. Call, Orgrim slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. In the past few years, he has rarely gone out to play. When he was young, he was still a little unscrupulous. As a pirate, there is nothing wrong with doing this. After meeting Queen Stussy, he restrained himself a lot. After Hancock, he has never gone out to play once. But it is undeniable that from the perspective of a driver, Orgrim is definitely an experienced driver. The kind of car that drives extremely fast. It's not like he hasn't owned beautiful women before. Queen Stussy or Hancock, which one is not the most beautiful woman in the country? He is also surrounded by many beauties, such as Robin, Monet, and Nami, who came just 2 days ago. But for some reason, Orgrim felt very complicated when facing Jun. He couldn't describe what it felt like to be this complicated. It has already been brought to your mouth. As long as you close your eyes and bite it, you can taste this delicious food. But he hesitated. This shouldn't be my style. Just when Orgrim was thinking about where this complicated feeling that puzzled him came from, the bathroom door was opened. Jun walked out. Her long, wet hair was scattered behind her, and her whole body was only wrapped in a pure white bath towel. Obviously nothing was revealed, but it made Orgrim's breathing quicken. Hey, Jun, let me remind you one last time, this is no time for joking. While I can still be a little manly, it's still too late for you to stop now, Orgrim said with a slightly serious tone. Jun smiled, without stopping, walked gently in front of Orgrim, bent his waist, and bit Orgrim in his mouth. Cigarettes, taken out. I really didn't expect you to be able to maintain your grace at a time like this, Jun said with a smile, then took the cigarette that was taken out of Orgrim's mouth and bit it on his own mouth. A scarlet light flashed in Orgrim's eyes, and he grabbed Jun's smooth arm and pulled it towards him. Jun sat on Orgrim's body. There was a faint fragrance coming from the tips of her wet hair. Vaguely, Orgrim saw the flash of panic in Jun's eyes. It seems that you are not as calm as you appear on the surface, Orgrim said with a smile. As soon as he finished speaking, both of them fell silent. After a long time, Jun exhaled a faint stream of smoke and said softly, I joined the Navy when I was very young. I know. After all, when I went to sea, you were a rear admiral at the Navy headquarters, Orgrim said softly. When I first joined the Navy, there weren't many people. Those who thought highly of me thought I was just a vase. But later, these people who once looked down upon me were all stepped on by me. Justice is in my heart. This belief can make me stronger and allow me to tell the world that I, Jun, am not just good looking, Jun said again. Orgrim didn't speak, just listened quietly. Originally he seemed to want to say something, but soon, Jun laughed again and said, really, what are you talking about with a bastard pirate like you, Orgrim, do you know? The kind of people who chase me can line up from Marineford to Marijoa and fill up the entire ocean. Of course I know. You are a flower in the Navy. It seems that the candidate for general, the T-Dolphin, is your #1 suitor, Orgrim responded with a smile. I have countless choices, excellent choices, but over the years, I have chosen no one, Jun said softly. After a short pause, Jun continued originally, I used the word justice as an excuse to convince myself. I told myself that throughout my life, I will dedicate myself to the word justice, feelings, likes, and love. This kind of thing is illusory and meaningless. It will only make people weak and vulnerable, put justice to shame. Orgrim still didn't speak. Jun reached out and touched Orgrim's face. She smiled, and her smile seemed bright. Then, she said, until I met you this bastard, perhaps as a Navy man, it is really inappropriate to say these words. I don't know when, but I realized that my feeling towards you is not simply unwillingness and hatred, but for some reason, after realizing this, my justice, my strength, and my belief became even stronger. This made me very confused. Shouldn't things like feelings be a burden and involvement? Shouldn't it be a bondage? Orgrim opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something. Jun stretched out a finger, pressed Orgrim's lips, and whispered, don't misunderstand anything, I'm not asking you for answers. This kind of answer should be found by me myself. Listen to this. Orgrim had no intention of speaking. In fact, he didn't know what answer he should give to this kind of thing. I can't win you no matter what. The more I catch up and the harder I try, the more I seem to feel this, the feeling of not being able to win, hatred and disgust. This feeling can no longer be my motivation, and this feeling can no longer support my determination to win you, Jun said with a slightly unwilling tone. Sorry, I can't understand this feeling. After all, to be honest, since I went to sea, although I have lost to many people, there seems to be no one who has made me feel like I can't win, no matter it is history. Whether it's Boss G, your Navy's Garp, Sengoku, or Whitebeard, although I've lost before, I've never felt the feeling of can't win. I've always felt that, give me some more with time, I can win. In fact, it seems like that's the case. Orgrim thought for a while and said. Poof, Jun suddenly laughed after hearing Orgrim's words. She couldn't help but shook her head and said, what you said makes me want to beat you. After laughing, Jun said with some emotion, but I really envy you. I envy you for being so confident. I also envy you for actually achieving this step and being unable to produce, feeling like I can't win. Perhaps this is the biggest difference between you and us. After another pause, Jun said, hate, disgust, these emotions can no longer support me to continue to become stronger. They cannot support me to implement the justice and beliefs I pursue with you, in the new world. Yes, I realized this back then on Holy Land Marijoa. You are right, it is really a shame for me to let a pirate like you board Marijoa openly. Jun looked into Orgrim's eyes and said. It was also from that time that I began to think about new strategies, how to maintain this fighting spirit, and how to have new motivation. I have never found the answer, until, today, I saw you again, Jun said softly. She was still talking to herself, and Orgrim was still listening quietly without interrupting her words. After seeing you again, I finally understood, or in other words, my mind was finally opened. If hatred and disgust don't work, what about like and love? Jun said so. There was a hint of surprise in Orgrim's eyes. The moment this thought arose, it was as if a fire was lit in my heart. This feeling, this long-lost feeling, I immediately understood. It is motivation and the belief that I must win you no matter what, just like the feeling I had back then, after leaving the capital of Seven Waters. That period of time was also the fastest time for me to become stronger. I understand that if I want to become stronger, I want to combine my justice with carry on your faith and win over you, Orgrim. If you want to do this, you must not go against your own heart. Only by following your own feelings can you follow your own path. Orgrim, I have to admit it, even though you are a pirate, the evil pirate I hate the most, as a woman, I am still attracted to you. I don't know when I fell in love with you, and there is no need to hide it from you anymore. Jun looked into Orgrim's eyes and said seriously. Before, I thought it was a shameful thing. As a righteous navy, I fell in love with a damn evil pirate. Of course, it makes me feel ashamed, but now, I am no longer ashamed of it. No matter who it is, if someone comes to ask me who the person I like or the person I love is, I will be open and honest. Answer without any hesitation. The person I, Momoto Jun, like and love is the most evil and powerful pirate in the world today, Hosgarot Orgrim. This is nothing to be ashamed of, Jun said in a very firm tone. Orgrim was very confused at this time. He could understand every word of Jun's words, but when combined, the meaning was confusing to him. Then, he watched Jun change from Orgrim to Mew, stood up and stepped on Orgrim's chest. That gesture was quite sultry, and the royal sister was full of offensive energy. The bathrobe was even more full of temptation. I will carry out this feeling. From now on, I will always like you and love you, and then, turn this feeling into my nourishment and become stronger. One day, I will defeat you with my own hands and attack you in the name of love and justice. Jun raised his chin and said in a very confident, even arrogant tone. Orgrim looked at her, and then laughed. Gee ha 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 ha, I have said so much, all of which I cannot understand, but Jun, I just need to understand one thing, that is enough. Today, you are not being forced with disgust and hatred. Will suffice, there's no reason for me to stay sane anymore, is there? Orgrim laughed. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hand to remove Jun's long leg from his chest, then stood up directly and carried Jun on his shoulders. Do you want to run through your so-called love and justice with me? To be honest, I don't understand what you are saying at all, but it doesn't matter. Tonight, I will be on you, penetrating the evil. Orgrim laughed loudly. He carried Jun to the bed and threw Jun on the bed. It was night. At the port, Marshal Sengoku asked a naval captain next to him, has Jun come back? The naval captain shook his head and said, no, I didn't see Vice Admiral Jun. Sengoku the marshal nodded lightly, looked towards the sea, and whispered, it seems, you have made a choice, Jun. I really don't know if this choice is right or wrong. But no matter what, he should believe in Jun and the justice of Jun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 636. Although the Golden City is not in the Evernight Sea at this time, but it is still a city that never sleeps, open all night, and at night, the lights are bright, and there are countless people here, enjoying themselves freely. When the first ray of sunshine fell in the morning, the city seemed a little quiet. On the top floor of the Black Pearl building. At this time, Queen Stussy, holding a cup of coffee in her hand, was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the city. Sister Stussy, Orgrim didn't come back last night. Hancock stood behind Stussy and said softly. There was a hint of anxiety between her eyebrows. Well, I haven't come back yet. Queen Stussy smiled and said slightly casually. Hancock looked slightly worried and said he went out with Jun, the female navy. They. Hancock, Queen Stussy suddenly interrupted Hancock, then she turned around, smiled and said, what are you worried about? Hancock was stunned for a moment, hesitant, but still said, I'm worried Orgrim was deceived by that female marine. No, you're not worried about that. Stussy smiled and reached out to rub Hancock's head, and then said softly, because you know very well that Orgrim will not be deceived. He is not a man who will be influenced by women. Are you worried? Yes, that navy took away Orgrim. Hancock was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said softly, maybe. Don't worry, just because she is a navy, she will never be able to steal Orgrim from us. Stussy said with a smile. Stussy knew early on that Orgrim was going shopping with Jun. To be honest, she was a little surprised when she learned the news. But this surprise soon became it disappeared. As a former top agent of CP-0, he was fascinated by Orgrim. Jun, why not? After the surprise, she also had worries and worries, but in the end, she settled down. Jun couldn't be like him and just leave the Navy or something like that. Because at that time, I was helpless, and Jun was obviously a man of faith. I still feel lucky to be out of the CP agency. Jun, she is different. She has a belief in justice. As long as this belief does not collapse, it is destined that she cannot be together with Orgrim. In this case, why should I worry about anything? As for what will happen between the two of them, there's not much to say. At this moment, the elevator door opened, and then Orgrim's strong figure walked in. As soon as he walked around the screen, he saw Hancock and Stussy, and then looked slightly embarrassed. This feeling is like going out to have sex and then coming home to find your wife waiting for you. After Hancock saw Orgrim, he immediately rushed forward, hugged Orgrim and said, "Lord Orgrim." "Oh, Hancock." Orgrim reached out and rubbed Hancock's head, not knowing what to say. Queen Stussy smiled and said, "Would you like some porridge?" Hancock stayed up all night. "Yes, it must be delicious." Hancock raised his head and said. Orgrim grinned and said, "Of course, I happen to be hungry." Soon, the room came alive. Orgrim sat at the dining table, drinking porridge and eating breakfast. The room also became lively, with Sphinx, Nami and others getting up. Everyone started moving. The little secretary Monet was standing behind Orgrim at this time. I said, "Why don't you sit down and have some food first?" Orgrim asked while drinking porridge. Monet shook his head and said because Mr. Hammer was missing yesterday, many schedules were disrupted. These have just been sorted out. The rescheduling requires your nod as soon as possible so that it can be implemented. All right, Orgrim felt that he was in the wrong and could only nod in response. Originally, after meeting Marshal Sengoku and the other Marines yesterday, Orgrim was supposed to arrange a meeting with Durag, but instead he casually invited Jun Empress. Orgrim never expected that things would develop unexpectedly, and the entire plan would be shattered. Durag stayed alone in the empty room, and he went with Jun Ching. Now that I think about it, I still feel a little sorry for Durag. Huh? No. Shouldn't it be because I feel sorry for Stussy and Hancock? If Mr. Hammer, you don't have any special arrangements today, then after breakfast, we can arrange a meeting with Mr. Dalag, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Monet said softly. There are no women in the Revolutionary Army, right? Hancock suddenly asked. Monet was stunned for a moment, and Orgrim's expression was even more embarrassing. Yes, a girl named Crawl, Monet quickly answered. Hancock first looked at Orgrim and found that there was nothing wrong with his expression. Then he nodded, said nothing more, and continued to eat breakfast. Queen Stussy looked at Orgrim with a funny expression, with some teasing in her eyes. Orgrim wanted to glare at her, but felt that he was wrong. In the end, he could only lower his head and eat in anger. After taking 2 bites, Orgrim said softly, "Okay, then let's arrange a meeting with Durag." Yes, Monet also responded quickly. But thinking about it carefully, he seems to have nothing to say to Durag. As for the Revolutionary Army helping to contain the Navy, in fact, Orgrim has no such intention at all. To be honest, he doesn't. I don't believe that the Revolutionary Army will be of much help. When we are facing the Navy headquarters, can your Revolutionary Army send troops to fight together? It is definitely impossible. The Revolutionary Army must be happy to take advantage of the situation and let it go. The Navy fights the Warhammer pirates to the death. On the other side, on the comfortable big bed in the hotel, Jun's brows moved slightly while she was sleeping, and then she slowly opened her eyes. Then, the soreness coming from her body made her feel a little uncomfortable. The room was quiet, and the breath of Orgrim was gone. Jun lay on the bed, Motionless, recalling everything last night, a blush appeared on his pretty face. It was obviously her first time to do such a thing, but why? What about enthusiasm? Jun sat up from the bed and leaned on the pillow. He saw a cup of cold fresh milk on the bedside table. Under the cup, there was a note. She smiled, reached out and took out the note, and took a look at it. I'm going to buy this house. No one will live in it except us in the future. Well, of course, I don't think you may live in it again. How about it? Do you have any regrets? But now it's too late for you to regret it. I'm afraid that you, a dead woman, will turn your back on me when you get up, so I'll take the first step. I've warmed the fresh milk, but I think it might be cold. You can warm it yourself and tell Waring States that guy, don't leave in such a hurry. I made an appointment with the 5 old stars to go to Marijoya. If he wants to leave, let him leave first. At least you have to stay and escort me to Marijoya. Anyway, last night, forget it, let's wait until we meet. Looking at the strong pen writing on the note, Jun couldn't help but smile and said softly, should I say you are considerate or ruthless, or grim? To be considerate, this guy left early before he woke up, and even warmed up a cup of fresh milk with great care. It was hard for Jun to imagine that this kind of thing was what Kazguros or Grim would do. His departure could certainly not be because he was afraid that he would turn against others or not recognize anyone when he got up. You should be worried that you will feel ashamed after you get up, right? This, it can be considered a kind of consideration. Ruthless, indeed it seemed ruthless. The people who slept together last night disappeared when they woke up. This feeling of emptiness made Jun feel a little lonely. He put the note back on the table, picked up a cigarette, lit it in his mouth, and released wisps of smoke. Then, he opened the bed quilt, revealing his work-like body that would definitely fascinate countless men. Jun casually put on the wrinkled bathrobe. Slowly walking to the one-way transparent floor-to-ceiling window, Jun exhaled a puff of smoke and looked at the bustling golden city. Finally, she raised her head and looked at the black building not far away that was different from the overall style of the golden city. Top layer. Hot, there is a ball of fire burning in my heart. The heartbeat was pounding and couldn't slow down. Jun could feel that even though it was just the same night as yesterday and he didn't train anything, he had become stronger. The feeling is unmistakable. Maybe it's not that the body and strength are getting stronger, but the belief is getting stronger. A feeling of clear thoughts arises spontaneously, and the shackles that have been imprisoning me are gone. One day, I will definitely defeat you, Orgrim, in the name of love and justice. Jun grinned and said with a charming smile that could confuse all living beings. I don't know if it was an illusion, but after one night, the charm of Jun seemed to have become even more powerful. After putting out the cigarette in his hand, Jun Yuan washed up, put on her own clothes, and was about to leave the house that seemed to have been bought by Orgrim. But after opening the door, she hesitated for a moment. Then, she turned around and returned to the house. Walked to the bed, looked at the note on the table, and the cup of fresh milk. After standing for a while, Jun reached out to pick up the note, put it in his pocket, and then picked it up again. After taking the cup, he didn't bother to reheat it, but drank it all in one gulp. I don't know if it was the quality of the fresh milk or some other reason. Jun always felt that maybe he drank this cup of milk by himself. The best fresh milk I've ever tasted. As soon as he put the cup down, Jun never looked back and walked out of the house in one breath. Arriving at the port, Marshal Sengoku just stepped off the warship and saw Jun taking the cloak with the word justice written on it from his adjutant and putting it on his shoulders. At this moment, the Navy's candidate for Admiral, Momoto Jun, came back again. Marshal Sengoku smiled, and did not ask what Jun and Orgrim did last night. Instead, he said the opening of the Slashiza is over, and we should go back. After hearing this, Jun waved his hand and said, Marshal, please go back by yourself. Waring States? You must have surrendered to the enemy, right? Jun. Can't I give you a salary increase? You don't want to leave, Marshal Sengoku asked in surprise. Jun nodded, and then seemed to notice something was wrong with Marshal Sengoku's expression, and quickly said, don't get me wrong, Orgrim will go to Maragio to meet with the 5 old stars. Ah, that's it. Marshal Warring States nodded clearly. After a slight pause, he said, okay, then you and Yu Xiao can stay here for now. There are a lot of things at the headquarters, and I don't have time to stay here. Got it? After finishing speaking, Marshal Sengoku nodded to Jun, turned around and prepared to leave. Jun looked at the back of the Warring States Marshal and suddenly said, Marshal, thank you. Marshal Warring States said without looking back. Is there anything you can thank me for? Trust. Jun smiled and said. Trusting your subordinates is what a marshal should do. Marshal Warring States still didn't look back, said with a smile, and boarded the warship. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 637. Sitting opposite Dalag, Orgrim had a cigar in his mouth. His thoughts were not here. He was wondering, did Jun drink that glass of milk? Probably not. After all, that damn woman is extremely proud. It seems you really don't trust our revolutionary army, Darag smiled and shook his head. Orgrim's thoughts finally came back a little, and he said, it sounds like you trust our Warhammer pirates very much. We are just using each other, so don't talk about trust, okay? Makes sense. Darag smiled, and after a slight pause, he said, since you don't plan to form any alliance or the like with us, then forget it. It would be really nice of you not to force me. Orgrim smiled and said. But to be honest, I would like to pay more for the quantity of arms. It's not like I won't pay for it, Darag said again. Gee, ha 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 ha, you are really stalking me. Can you act like the leader of the Revolutionary Army? Don't you want to lose face? I mention this every time, Orgrim laughed and said. What's the use of saving face? The inside is what matters, right? Anyway, I can see that I have never had any face to speak of with you. Darag shrugged and said as if he didn't care at all. Tisk, that's what you said. Orgrim smacked his lips, and then continued, I will accept this matter. Thank you very much. Darag smiled and nodded. Look, what's the use of having face? Only by being shameless can you gain more benefits, well, although I have to pay more. Orgrim had no intention of developing deeper cooperation with their revolutionary army, and Darag could not force anything. The Warhammer pirates are really difficult to deal with. In this case, there is nothing serious to do, so we have to continue talking to Orgrim. This time I came to Golden City. It wasn't perfect, but at least I made some progress in terms of arms. This is such a good place, Dalag suddenly said. Orgrim smiled and said, yes, a good place. I never thought that pirates could do what you do, neutral zone, ha ha ha, really unexpected, Dalag said with some emotion. Gee, ha 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 ha, creating the impossible, isn't this the most interesting thing? Orgrim laughed. Yeah, quite interesting, Darag nodded. What their revolutionary army did was exactly the same thing. Is it impossible to create? It's good to have your Golden City here. At least for our revolutionary army, many things are much more convenient. To a certain extent, there is no need to be sneaky, Darag said with a smile. Serve the people, Orgrim smiled and said. Darag's eyes lit up and he grinned. This is really a good slogan. Do you mind if I borrow it? Orgrim. Of course I do. Orgrim said without hesitation. That's really stingy, Darag complained. After a slight pause, Darag grinned and said, Jun is a good woman. Orgrim frowned slightly and said, don't you have a bad intention of following me? Darag, I don't know what his abilities are, but he definitely comes and goes without a trace. The tracking is top-notch. Darag rolled his eyes and said, don't think I'm so worthless, okay? You let me go yesterday, so I naturally want to find out who is so capable. Is it more important to you than me? You didn't hide anything. A lot of things were sent to the Navy warship for free. How can I still not know what happened? Gee ha 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 ha, that's true. Orgrim said with a smile. Did you see it too? Dalag suddenly asked. Orgrim was a little confused. What did I see? But on the surface, he remained calm and said calmly, I don't know what you are talking about. Jun, Dalag murmured softly, as if he didn't mean to hide his thoughts, shook his head and said yes, the future of the Navy. As soon as he said these words, Orgrim's mind was like lightning flashing, and his thoughts were instantly opened. Is Jun the future of the Navy? Perhaps it is because of the inherent thoughts and ideas, and the so-called profit. In short, Orgrim had never thought about these things before. He never thought that Jun would be the future of the Navy. But Darag's words made Orgrim grasp something. What? But now, he hasn't cleared his mind yet. Maybe, Orgrim smiled and said, with an expression of I understand everything. Darag didn't think much about it. After all, in his impression of Orgrim, Orgrim had never been the reckless man that the outside world thought. From the beginning, Darag believed that Orgrim was the kind of pirate who had both ability and political integrity. Being a reckless man may be just a means and expression of his behavior to confuse the world. Planning before taking action is the essence of Orgrim. Anyway, he never expected that there could be any feelings of affection and love between Orgrim and Jun. What he said just now was just a joke. He thought Orgrim's date with Jun last night had some deeper meaning. Who knows, the two of them just went to have sex. After picking up the teacup on the table and taking a sip, Darag stood up and said, well, in short, it seems that we have nothing to say. Seriously, don't hang around me all the time. I really have no interest in your revolutionary army. If something like this happens in the future, don't come to me. Go find Newgate. Then the old guy seems to be serious about being a pirate, but he is actually secretly doing charity. He may have something in common with people like you. Orgrim waved his hand and said. Yeah, Darag smiled, and then said then I might go visit him another day. You really have no moral integrity at all. Orgrim complained. Ha 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 ha, I can't compare to big shots like you, Darag said with a laugh. Then he turned around, waved his hand and said, no need to send it away. I'm not ready to send it either. Orgrim rolled his eyes and said. Ha 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 ha, farewell. Darag didn't feel embarrassed. After laughing, he turned and left. Just as Orgrim expected, he did not have any deeper cooperation or conversation with the Revolutionary Army. In fact, he and the Revolutionary Army, and indeed there is nothing to talk about. If it weren't for this guy Darag, there are some celebrities who are shameless and always want to have something to do with him. The two of them would not even meet. But Dalag is getting more and more with such a shameless look. Orgrim can feel the difficulty of the Revolutionary Army. After all, he is also very experienced in shameless things. The stronger, the more shameless, the more difficult it becomes to deal with. After Dalag left, Monet walked to Orgrim's side and said softly, Master Hammer, Crocodile's ship has arrived. Orgrim raised his brows slightly, with a smile on his lips. Is he finally here? Crocodile. At the same time, at the port, a pirate ship with a crocodile head hanging on it slowly docked into the port of the Golden City. I don't know if Crocodile did it on purpose or what happened. In short, his ship happened to be parked next to the G-5 Navy warship in Jun. Standing on the deck, Jun held a cup of hot milk in his hand, and the justice cloak behind him was fluttering in the sea breeze. I don't know why, but after I came back, I fell in love with drinking milk. Crocodile, Jun looked at the ship and whispered softly. After Crocodile entered the New World, he fought against the G-5 Navy once. But that's just what it meant, it didn't really spark any sparks. It seems that the wonderful idea of martial boss did not come true, Jun thought a little funny. Originally, the warring states marshal was still thinking whether Crocodile would fight Orgrim after entering the New World. Now it seems that it is impossible. Orgrim's power is so powerful that Crocodile rushed to visit the dock as soon as he entered the New World. Crocodile also slowly walked off the ship at this time and stood in the port. He was wearing a black suit, with a brown plush coat draped over his shoulders. He still had his domineering slicked back hair, a cigar biting in his mouth, and golden hooks on his arms, echoing the Golden City. Very contrasting. First, he took a look at this magnificent and huge entertainment city, and then he felt a line of sight, which seemed to be staring at him. Crocodile turned his head and looked in the direction of the sight. On the warship nearby, the difficult woman in the navy was holding a glass of milk and looking at him. Neutral zone, ha ha ha, Crocodile sneered in his heart, then turned around and walked towards the port without looking at Jun. According to the agreement, Albia should come to meet with him first, right? Looking at Crocodile's arrogant back, Jun didn't feel angry. He put the fresh milk to his mouth, took a sip, and said with a smile on his face, I really hope you meet Ogre how can you be so arrogant, Crocodile? But she can already imagine that Crocodile will definitely not be arrogant in Orgrim. Originally, with her status, there should be nothing to be happy about. But for some reason, she felt a little happy and expectant at this time. It felt like Orgrim taught Crocodile a lesson and he also took it out. This made Jun think of a sentence. How did he say that sentence? Women conquer the world by conquering men. I don't know who said this. Before, Jun had always sneered at it. But now, it feels like there is some truth to it. Conquer, Orgrim. Jun couldn't help but smile, and said to himself, this is no less difficult than conquering the world. After drinking the fresh milk in his hand, Jun looked at the sea again. The sea breeze was a little cold. He didn't stay on the deck any longer and turned around to go back to the cabin. Well, do you want to keep a cow or something on the boat? Jun said to himself with some anticipation. On the other side, Crocodile also saw the woman waiting for him. Nicole Orbia, Crocodile said with a slightly evil smile. Crocodile, Albia also looked at Crocodile with some complicated eyes. After a short pause, Albia said, you knew a long time ago that I will definitely come back, right? Of course, the flower of darkness and revenge is not so easy to wither, and the Warhammer pirates cannot give you any help. Orgrim is not that kind of person, otherwise he would not be able to reach this point today. Only I am your first choice, happy working together? Crocodile said with a smile on his face. Cooperation or something depends on whether you can get out of here alive, Albia said with some displeasure. But he still reached out and shook Crocodile's hand. Because she knew that Orgrim would not kill Crocodile in the Golden City no matter what. Because it's not worth it? To Orgrim, it's not worth losing the credibility of the neutral zone of the Golden City for a mere crocodile. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 638. Standing in the elevator, Crocodile felt a little emotional. He is somewhat wealthy, after all, he spent so many years of effort to capture Alabasta. I originally thought that this should be comparable to Orgrim. After all, it sounds like Avalon is not very different from Alabasta. They have a population of tens of millions, and even talking about the army, Alabasta's army is even larger. From an island perspective, Alabasta is also a very large island. If the location is favorable, Orgrim is in the Sea of Eternal Night. Crocodile also has a vast desert. It's nothing more than a lack of a foundation in the New World. Crocodile originally wanted to build this foundation in about 5 years, just like Orgrim now owns the Evernight Sea. But after seeing the Golden City, Crocodile still felt that Orgrim, in other words, the gap between the Warhammer pirates and him. The gap in financial resources and power. In terms of financial resources, Orgrim might be able to surpass him by a dozen or so. In terms of power, the Golden City has proven that Orgrim has enough confidence to allow the world government to get along with him as an equal. Many matters must be discussed with him, the King of the Night. Otherwise, such a neutral zone would be a joke and cannot be established. Look, the warring statesman of the Navy, the Marshal of the Navy who is the overlord of the sea, has to come to the Golden City's platform in person. Isn't this proof enough? We are about to see Orgrim at this moment. We haven't seen him for so many years, and I really feel something unusual in my heart. Originally, Crocodile felt that there would not be too much pressure on him to meet Orgrim, because he was sure that Orgrim would not fight against him. Albia also sent a message that as long as he did not cause trouble with Orgrim, Orgrim would not bother to pay attention to him. The two are at the same time, and although Orgrim is doing better now, Crocodile still feels that he shouldn't be under too much pressure. But at this time, I haven't seen Orgrim's face yet. I'm just about to see him, standing in the elevator that is gradually rising. That pressure is getting stronger and stronger. Just as Crocodile was thinking about this, the elevator door opened. Then, Albia said, "We're here, Orgrim is inside." Crocodile nodded, secretly adjusted his mood, and stepped out of the elevator. Still walking around the screen, I happened to see Orgrim sitting on the sofa, holding a teacup in his hand. His eyes were a little hollow, as if he was thinking about something. Although there are rumors that Orgrim hardly manages the affairs of the Warhammer pirates and leaves everything to Beckman, but, it seems that even if he doesn't take care of things, Orgrim always thinks about the future, right? Crocodile thought so in his heart. He felt that he was already very busy. How could Orgrim be idle when he stood higher? You see, he is thinking about something now, although he doesn't know what it is. But it must be very important, right? Can it even affect the situation on the sea? After all, it seems that he just met the Marshal of the Navy yesterday. He must have discussed something very important, which made him a little undecided. Bar. What should I eat for lunch? I kind of want to eat steak. Did that damn woman in Jun drink that cup of milk? So boring, Orgrim thought in his heart. That's right, he wasn't thinking about anything important at all. As Crocodile guessed, he was just bored. Just as I was thinking about this, I heard the sound of footsteps and my thoughts were pulled back. Then, Orgrim turned to look at Crocodile. It really had been many, many years since he had seen each other, or in other words, he and Crocodile had almost never met. The only time they ever met was in front of Roger's execution platform. Crocodile was a high-spirited guy who was the first to respond to the chaotic frenzy set off by Orgrim. It can be regarded as giving him some help. In terms of friendship, it is just a bit. Putting aside everything else, Orgrim actually has a good impression of people like Crocodile. Able, strong, ambitious, and able to endure loneliness. A complete template for a hero. Orgrim had reason to appreciate people like Crocodile. With a raised corner of his mouth, Orgrim stood up directly and greeted with a smile, "Crocodile, this is the first official meeting between the two of us, right? Come on, sit down, you're welcome." Crocodile, I was a little surprised. According to the news from Orbia, Orgrim should be the kind of person who has no interest or affection in him, right? Why do you look so enthusiastic when we meet today? He glanced at Albia for a moment and thought, are you trying to trick me? Crocodile was confused in his heart, but on the surface, he remained calm. He nodded with a smile and said, yes, this is the first official meeting between us, the King of the Night. He is a man who knows how to be patient, able to bear the infamy of King Shishibukai, and the reputation of a waste, and has worked hard in Alabasta for nearly 20 years. There is no doubt that he, Crocodile, can definitely pick it up and put it down. Therefore, before coming to see Orgrim, Crocodile already knew what attitude, identity, and tone he should use. Arrogance is reserved for the weak, respect is for the strong. He was ready to bow his head, and he was also ready for Orgrim to give him a blow and endure some humiliation. But, it seems, this is not the case. However, this did not affect his thoughts. He still respectfully called Orgrim the king of the night without any pretense at all. Gee, ha 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 ha, you're too polite. It seems that the king of the night is not a king. You and I are at the same time. When I was in Rogtown, I was taken care of by you. Just call me Orgrim, Orgrim said with a smile. Since Orgrim said this, Crocodile didn't intend to be pretentious. After all, he didn't really come to be a dog for Orgrim. He was greeted and sat down. Crocodile then continued, okay, Orgrim, to be honest, I didn't expect that you would have this attitude towards me. This attitude? Orgrim smiled, and then said, do you think that I am giving you some condescending posture, or that I am asking you to stand and listen to my lectures? It's not like I haven't thought about it, Crocodile said with a smile. At this moment, Queen Stussy placed the teacups and poured Crocodile a cup of tea. Crocodile took the teacup, nodded to Queen Stussy and said, thank you, Ms. Stussy. You're welcome, please use it. Stussy said with a smile. Gee ha 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 ha, then you think of me too badly, right? Orgrim laughed. After a slight pause, Orgrim took a sip of tea first, and then continued, after all, that kind of gesture and approach will have no effect on you at all, Crocodile. Will you be frightened by me if I put on a majestic posture? Of course not, respect is respect, fear is fear. Out of my attitude towards the strong, I can respect you, even be in awe, but I will not be afraid of you, even though, I did feel a lot of pressure. Crocodile said softly. Yes, even if we haven't talked, I know that you are this kind of person. Otherwise, you will not enter the new world, let alone come to see me, so there is no need for me to act like a superior person. It's just a joke. Orgrim said with a smile. After finishing speaking, Orgrim picked up a cigar from the table, gestured and said, try it. Crocodile was not polite, nodded and said okay. Orgrim handed Crocodile a cigar, although he also lit one. The two of them sat together in a very harmonious atmosphere, and started puffing away. Have you ever thought about doing it with me? In fact, I admire you very much. If you are willing to join our Warhammer pirates, Crocodile, I can give you great freedom and space. If you want a Corps Cotter status, I can give it to you. If you want to be an independent captain, I can also give you a new world for you to roam. How? Orgrim asked after exhaling a puff of smoke. Although he felt that the possibility of such a thing was extremely low, Crocodile should not be such a person. But there is no disadvantage in asking. You see, yesterday, I casually asked Junichi if I wanted to go on a date. Didn't I just go on the date happily and even get unexpected results? What if Crocodile really had a twitch in his head and agreed? What if? Didn't you make a lot of money? After listening to Orgrim's words, Crocodile couldn't help but smile, waved his hands and said, please spare me for this kind of thing. What I could have done more than 10 years ago, I can't do it. Do you need to do it now? I have spent nearly 20 years, not on psychological construction, to build a people who will defect to you, Orgrim. Sure enough, I still refused. Orgrim curled his lips and said helplessly. Do you really think that I will agree? Crocodile asked with a smile. Gee ha 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 ha, that's right, there's nothing to be disappointed about. Orgrim laughed. After a slight pause, Orgrim asked again, so, do you want to be the 4 emperors when you come to the new world? Well, yes, I have this idea, is that okay? Crocodile asked. He knew that as a Yonko or something, the rest of the new world had no qualifications to compete with him. In the final analysis, this still depends on Orgrim's attitude. If Orgrim is not happy, it would be difficult for him, Crocodile, to sit in this position. If Orgrim was willing, everything would be much easier. It's not impossible, I won't care about this. Whoever wants to be a candidate can just do it. There is no need to look at my opinion. Orgrim smiled and said. If you don't object, that's fine. Crocodile felt a little more at ease. But what I'm curious about is, what are you going to do in the new world? What would you do if you took the position of the so-called pirate emperor? Orgrim suddenly asked. Crocodile looked into Orgrim's eyes and said nothing for a while. Orgrim also stared at him quietly. After a long time, Crocodile said softly, he said, the ultimate goal can be regarded as challenging you, defeating you, and replacing you. Gee, ha 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 ha, Orgrim laughed. Ultimate goal? Are you really honest? Are you afraid that I will kill you here? Orgrim asked with a smile. Not to mention whether this is a neutral zone created by you yourself, I think that without this kind of tolerance, you, Orgrim, would be nothing more than that, Crocodile said nonchalantly. I really appreciate you more and more, Crocodile. Do you really not think about it and do it with me? I rarely invite others like this. Orgrim asked with a smile again. Crocodile still shook his head. That's such a shame, Orgrim smacked his lips and said. If the ultimate goal is to challenge me, then, what about at this stage? Is it convenient to say? If it's inconvenient, just treat it as if I didn't ask. Orgrim said again. Stand firm and develop strength, nothing less. Of course, if you want to go against the Navy, I can cooperate with you to a certain extent. Crocodile said softly, not hiding anything. Do you recognize my position as commander in the pirate camp? Orgrim raised his eyebrows and said. No, what I admit is your great power. Crocodile smiled and said. The meaning of his words was very obvious. If one day, Crocodile possesses enough to challenge your Orgrim's power, times will change. However, this is enough for Orgrim. On the sea, there are many people who want to challenge him, Orgrim. But who has succeeded? Sitting in the strongest position, he is already. We must meet the challenges from heroes from all over the world. If we don't even have the courage, how can we be the strongest? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 639. The gambling houses in the Golden City are not just high-end and luxurious casinos. There are also low-end gambling houses. On the contrary, many gamblers, even if they are qualified to enter high-end casinos, are not willing to go there, and prefer to go to such low-end gambling houses. At this time, in a low-end gambling house, Navy Fujitora smiled and was happily placing bets here. Brother opposite, are you very lucky? Fujitora asked with a smile as he fiddled with the chips in his hand. At this time, sitting opposite Fujitora was actually Ace. There was a lot of chips on the table in front of him. Fujitora, he smiled helplessly as he watched this kid win so far with 50,000 belly. His luck was really amazing. Ace was also in a happy mood at this time. Even if the person sitting opposite him was a Navy man, he didn't care. Said with a smile, it seems that my luck has been good these days. Ha ha ha, that seems to be the case, Fujitora laughed. But soon, Ace was slapped in the face. When the dice clock opened, it was Fujitora who won. Time has turned. Fujitora looked at Ace with a smile and said with a smile. Ace was very generous and didn't care about winning or losing at this moment. He waved his hand and said, as long as I don't lose my pitiful 50,000 belly, I will make a profit. 50,000 belly? Fujitora smiled and murmured, and then asked, where can I find a job, brother? Although I haven't had any actual sparring or fighting. But for some reason, Fujitora has a natural liking for Ace. I feel that this little guy may be a talent, and I want to try to see if I can get him to G-5. Let's train them in the Navy. There is no way. Nowadays, all the major forces are recruiting soldiers. Talents are rare, so there is nothing wrong with giving it a try. It has been a few days since Ace came to the Golden City, but with Na May is different. Nami is the one Orgrim wants to see by name. Eren naturally wants to send Nami to Lord Hammer as soon as possible. Ace is different. Ace is Eren's own decision. Orgrim didn't even know about this. He didn't expect that Garp's grandson, Roger's son, was actually in the Golden City. He thought that Ace was now in the Grand Line. He was wandering around in the first half, with no reputation, which means he has not yet made a name for himself. Especially, the Shasheo fruit that should have belonged to Ace is now in the hands of Orgrim. What will Ace become like? He didn't think about it at all. Previously, Orgrim's schedule was quite full, and Eren was not in a hurry, so he didn't rush to report his merits to Lord Hammer. Nami also had a thought. A well-informed person knows that Eren has not mentioned anything about Ace, so she kept silent about it. Therefore, Orgrim was completely unaware of Ace's arrival. Ace thought about it, and originally wanted to. He told the sailor opposite that he was actually a pirate. But when he was about to speak, he hesitated. It wasn't that he was afraid of anything, he just felt a little embarrassed and ashamed. What if that guy heard that he was a pirate? I couldn't help but ask myself which pirate group I belonged to and how much the bounty was. How should I answer? You can't say that you are a self-proclaimed pirate and the bounty is 0, right? That would be too embarrassing. So Ace thought for a while. After a while, he said, well, barely, I can be considered a dishwasher. The dishwasher? Fujitora smiled and was stunned for a moment. Then he was not surprised by this question. Instead, he said with a smile, really, to be honest, Fujitora smiles, he is the Vice Admiral of the New World G-5 Navy branch and he is quite capable. Seeing that you are a good match for me, how about I introduce you to him? How about joining the Navy and serving him well? Ace's expression stiffened a little. If I wanted to join the Navy, would I need you to introduce me? It's not enough for me to recommend you. My old man is the naval hero Garp. So Ace waved his hands and said, no, my situation is a bit complicated, and I'm not free yet. This is just an excuse. Fujitora smiled and was stunned for a moment, then asked, brother, do you owe Bailey? If it's convenient. Fujitora smiled and thought, if he was really destined, he would just pay for this guy to forgive his debt. Anyway, a gangster navy like G-5 can make money very quickly. Fujitora smiled, and he has accumulated some savings over the years. As a wandering single, he has no family and no girlfriend. It is the kind where one person is full and the whole family is not hungry. Saving money? It is impossible to save money, so how can there be happiness from gambling? What's more, in the past few years, Bailey's value has continued to depreciate. Didn't you look at the bounties of the pirates, which kept rising? A few years ago, those who dared to reward more than 100 million were big pirates with real abilities. Nowadays, it seems that any cat or dog can be rewarded with a reward of over 100 million. This is proof. Anyway, he is not short of money, and he doesn't care about money, so he came up with this idea. But before he finished speaking, a figure walked into the gambling house. This made Fujitora pause at what he was saying with a smile. Oh? You rotten gambler, you are indeed here. Let me tell you, your boss went to see Mr. Hammer yesterday, and you didn't even show your face. You must have sneaked into the gambling house as soon as you arrived in the Golden City. Sphinx walked over carelessly and said. Fujitora smiled and said, so you are also in this Golden City, Sphinx. I haven't seen you for a while. Well, that's about it. I haven't seen you for a while. What's wrong? Is the G-5 Navy affordable enough for you to spend money in the Golden City? Let me tell you, those of us in the Warhammer Pirates enjoy many benefits here. If you like gambling, why don't you join me? Golden City, don't say that you are not moved, SPHYNX said with a smile. Then he sat down opposite Fujitora with a smile. To be honest, if I had heard about the Golden City when I was on Gamblin Island, I might have been attracted by it, but forget it now. The Navy has not been unkind to me, so how can I be unjust to the Navy? Fujitora said with a smile. Tisk, you are really stubborn. What good is the Navy? Hey, do you have a wink? Sit a little to the side and leave a space for me, huh? Ace. Why are you here? The Sphinx said with some surprise. Ace moved his butt awkwardly, and then said, come to have fun, and see if you can make some money and redeem yourself. Fujitora was a little surprised at this time. Ace. This name sounds familiar. Where have you heard it before? After thinking about it for a while, he couldn't figure it out, but what surprised him even more was that the Sphinx actually knew this guy Ace. Do you know each other? Fujitora asked with a strange smile. Of course I know you. This is my little brother, a member of the Warhammer Pirates. Sphinx reached out and patted Ace's shoulder carelessly. Fujitora smiled and looked at Ace with a strange expression. Little brother, you don't have martial ethics, so you lied to me? He is obviously a member of the Warhammer Pirates, but he still claims that he is a jobber washing dishes. Ace seemed to have noticed Fujitora's smiling eyes, and quickly said, Sphinx, don't talk nonsense, I didn't really agree to join the Warhammer Pirates or anything like that. You came here with Aaron, what are you talking about? Where do you think the Warhammer Pirates are? You can come when you want and leave when you want. Believe it or not, I will open 3 holes and 6 holes for you, SPHYNX said with a fierce look like a gangster sister. I was captured by force, okay, Ace said helplessly. In fact, in his heart, he was also looking forward to it. Come to the Golden City and see Orgrim. After all, Orgrim should treat Roger and his father. Sound familiar? But he had no intention of saying anything like this, saying that he was the son of the Pirate King or something like that. Sphinx was too lazy to pay attention to Ace, and said, the Sengoku of your navy are all gone, and you are still here? Come on, let's make a bet. Fujitora smiled and everyone was dumbfounded. What the hell? Marshal of the Warring States period is gone? How come I don't know? Is my Jun eldest sister gone? Holy shit, how long have I been gambling? The Marshal is gone? Fujitora exclaimed with a smile. Let's go. In the morning, his warship left, Sphinx said matter-of-factly. Did our G-5 warship leave? Fujitora smiled and asked quickly. Ah, no, that bastard woman from Jun is still there. I get upset when I see her. She seems to be waiting for Mr. Sui, right? After all, you still have escort missions, Sphinx spoke as he placed his bet. Escort mission? Why don't I know anything? Are you the Navy, or am I the Navy? Escort, what? Fujitora asked with a guilty smile. Why don't you know anything? So what are you doing here? Escort what? Escort, of course I am going to Marjoria, Sphinx said impatiently. Escort Orgrim to Marijoa? Fujitora is very confused now. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? Am I not a vice admiral? Why don't I know anything about the Navy? Sphinx also reacted a little at this time, and asked with an evil smile on his lips, it seems that you don't know what happened last night. What happened? Fujitora swallowed with a smile and asked. He was really afraid that something important happened in the world last night, something important enough to require Orgrim to come to Marijoya in person. Then he would really be derelict in his duty, This is what you do in the Navy. The Sphinx looked around, then glared at Ace and said, "Why are children so curious? Go, go, sit farther away." Seeing a little lowly flirting with him, Ace felt very depressed. He was also curious about what happened last night. But being chased by the Sphinx, he had no choice but to sit aside. At this time, the Sphinx moved its head towards Fujitora's smile, and Fujitora smiled and quickly came over. "Something terrible happened last night," Sphinx said furtively. Fujitora smiled and his heart sank, and he asked, "What's the matter?" "That damn woman from your Navy seems to have seduced my Mr. Hammer, both of them, you know." "Hey hey hey," the Sphinx smiled very evilly. Fujitora smiled. "What the hell are you, hee hee? That's it?" Fujitora asked with a smile. "Yes, isn't this a big deal?" asked the Sphinx in surprise. "I thought the world was going to end," Fujitora smiled helplessly and complained. "That's it? What's the big deal? Who said the Navy can't like pirates? The Navy is in charge of heaven and earth, but can it still control other people's relationships?" "That's right," Fujitora Isho, as a Marine, really thinks so. After all, he is a Ronin. "Don't you find it incredible?" The Sphinx looked at the calm Fujitora in surprise and asked with a smile. "There is nothing incredible. This kind of thing has always been unbelievable. If people can control this kind of emotion, that wouldn't be human," Fujitora said very calmly with a smile. Then, when the dice clock opened, he said with a smile, "It seems that I won." "You are unlucky, Sphinx." "Hey, I have plenty of money." The Sphinx waved his hand, looking unconcerned. "It hurts my heart," Fujitora smiled, shook his head, and said with a smile. He can be considered as having enough food and drink, but compared with the Sphinx and the core members of the Warhammer Pirates, he is really far behind. Perhaps the core members of the Warhammer Pirates are richer than 99% of the people in the sea, right? I really feel that the Tianlong people are not as comfortable as they are here. A sledgehammer breaks into pirates. Author, Zippo. Chapter 640. North Sea, Free Fans. This country has long been destroyed. When the evil party came in, it was so chaotic that it was impossible to build any city or anything like that. At this time, the urban layout here is still the same as before the destruction of Free Fans. It's just that it's even messy than it was then. Run, run. What kind of monsters are these? A group of guys who didn't look like good people were running away in a dilapidated city. At this moment, a slash passed by and blocked a high-rise building that was already in danger not far from them. Cut off. Then, the collapsed floor instantly covered the group of villains. A figure rolled several times from the air and landed on a piece of rubble in the ruins with very sharp movements. He held a long knife in his hand. The air was freezing cold. A closer look revealed that it was Orgrim's son Andrest. At this time, there was a slight wound on Andrest's face, and a trace of blood flowed from the wound. Stretched out his thumb and wiped it on the wound. Andrest glanced at the blood on his finger and grinned. "You have good swordsmanship, you bastard kid." While he was speaking, the wounds on his face felt faintly healed. However, in terms of speed, it is still much inferior to Orgrim. But, it can already be said to be awesome. "Imp. You are not as old as me, right?" A figure gradually emerged from the smoke not far away. This figure was wearing a black and white spotted velvet hat. He looked like he was about 10 years old, very young and very handsome. In his hand, he held a long knife. The knife seemed to be almost as tall as him. He was wearing a black windbreaker, ordinary jeans, and a pair of high-tech military boots on his feet. The whole thing, he looks very energetic and sharp. If Doflamingo or Orgrim were here, they would definitely recognize this handsome young man as Trafalgar Law. At the beginning, Doflamingo was the kid that Lang Ming drove away cruelly. "How old are you, Andrest actually still had the mood to ask this question. 22 Trafalgar Law raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile. Andrest was stunned for a moment. Then you don't have to worry about your appearance. Judging from your face, I thought you were only 15 or 16 years old. And you? Trafalgar Law asked with some evil intent. Andrest's face stiffened slightly and he said coldly, do you want you to take more care of me? As soon as he finished speaking, the demon sword Zindu in his hand brought out a sharp cold light. He stepped on it and rushed towards Trafalgar Law. Trafalgar Law seemed a little calm and leisurely. With the blade in his hand he raised his head and directly blocked Andrest's slash, and then the two of them started fighting. He blocked the slash with a knife, and with a backhand lever, he did not open the blade. Trafalgar Law's hand was the long sword slashed towards Andrest's chest very smoothly. A flash of light flashed in Andrest's eyes, he stepped back, and after slightly opening a step away, the demon sword Xiandu moved back accurately. Take it back and withstand Trafalgar Law's slashing blow. Your moves seem to be very powerful, but they are too rigid. If my guess is correct, you rarely fight to the death with others, right? Trafalgar Law said softly. As he spoke, the movements in his hands fell, and his aura seemed to be a little more fierce, with a strong murderous intent, coming towards his face. Andrest frowned slightly wrinkled, he moved his hand slowly, catching all of Trafalgar Law's slashes. But soon, he found that he couldn't seem to find the rhythm of counterattack. At the same time, he also knew that in front of him, this man is right. Although his moves are powerful, after all, he is the master of the first swordsman Mihawk. He can fight to the death with others. There is really very little combat experience in this area, it can even be said that there is almost no experience. But it doesn't matter. Isn't it just to hone these things that he went to see this time? With a clang, Trafalgar Law knocked Andrest back a few steps with his sword. He flicked the long sword in his hand and said in a deep voice, it seems that your swordsmanship is from a famous master. Judging from the clothes on your body, from the looks of it, it looks pretty good. He must have a good background. That knife is also a good knife, but, you and I are completely opposite. As soon as he finished speaking, a ruthless look flashed in Trafalgar Law's eyes, and he said, kid, hand over that devil fruit, and I will let you live. Otherwise, no matter who you are or what your identity is, in this discord, a chaotic place where no one cares, I will definitely kill you. Imp. It's really learning now and selling it now. People who know how to kill will not talk about such things. Your knife, your murderous intention, it's not as powerful as you show. Andrest grinned and said with an evil smile. Trafalgar Law frowned and said softly, in that case, don't blame me. He will naturally kill people. Otherwise, how could he have survived all these years in the North Sea and in a hell like Free Fens? It's just that as a doctor, even if he is a doctor in the dark, he is not willing to kill people. As soon as he finished speaking, Trafalgar Law had a fierce look in his eyes, stepped on his foot, and rushed toward Andrest at an extremely fast speed. This time, his knife brought a real murderous aura. There was a smile in Andrest's eyes, and he tightened his grip on the demonic sword in his hand, and said softly, you said I don't have much experience in fighting with people to death? That's right. However, this does not mean that I will not fight to the death with others. As soon as Andrest finished speaking, Trafalgar Law's knife had already been thrust out. As the power in his hand increased, the demon sword Zindu quickly turned black. Domineering, Trafalgar Law exclaimed in surprise. That's right, Andrest shouted violently. His chest was quickly covered with armed domineering energy. The tip of Trafalgar Law's knife stabbed Andrest in the chest, but was struck by an armed force. The domineering power of the color resisted it. At the same time, with a flash of light, Andrest slashed towards Trafalgar Law. At this critical moment, Andrest's gaze also brought a touch of surprise. Domineering. Yes, at this time, Trafalgar Law also had a weapon-like domineering energy wrapped around his arm, and he blocked and dressed slash and blocked the slash. The domineering confrontation of armed colors slightly stirred up some collision airflow. "Don't you think that you are the only one who can use the power of hacking?" Trafalgar Law said with a smile on his lips. At the same time, the blade in his hand was quickly covered with armed domineering energy and became sharper. Not to mention anything else, just talking about the power of domineering energy. In other words, Trafalgar Law's domineering power is obviously stronger than Andrest's. Although the difference is not very big, it is indeed stronger. Perhaps it has something to do with the length of practice? There is a stabbing pain in Anne's chest. Dreist knew that this was a sign that his domineering power was about to be broken. Master Mihawk had done this kind of thing to him many times. He also didn't expect that in a rural sea like Bihai, he could meet people of the same age. Well, although he is not the same age, this guy is still a few years older than me. I never expected to meet such an opponent. Defeat. No, you must not lose. How could you lose so easily? Thinking of this, Andrest felt fierce in his heart, and the armed domineering force on his chest that was used for defense suddenly withdrew. What? Trafalgar Law was shocked and wanted to stop, but couldn't. There was a flash of blood, and the sharp blade sank directly into the chest of the young man in front of him who looked like an aristocrat. At the same time, Andrest suddenly took a step forward, letting the blade on his chest sink deeper. Then, he threw away the blocked demon sword, heart crossing, and all the domineering power he had just torn away was all in one go. Hit on his own fist. How? Andrest roared angrily. He punched Trafalgar Law on the head, breaking through his domineering power and sending him flying away. Without pursuing him immediately, Andrest stamped his foot, and the demon sword's Indu bounced directly from the ground. He grabbed the blade and at the same time pulled out the knife inserted in his chest. The blood could not stop flowing, but Andrest didn't pay attention at all. There was a scarlet light in his eyes. He held the knife in both hands and crossed it. The domineering power was attached to the blade. Deolu ferocious wolf, Andrest shouted lowly, and the moment he finished speaking, he suddenly exerted force on his feet. The ground cracked slightly, and his figure, like a bad wolf, rushed towards Trafalgar Law, who was flying backwards at an extremely fast speed and had not yet landed. The strong evil aura made Trafalgar Law feel that something was wrong from a long distance away. This was the first time he encountered this desperate style of play. The originally good situation was suddenly overturned. He has little experience in mocking others for fighting for their lives. In the end, will he die himself? Trafalgar Law thought in his heart. The next second, a trace of cruelty also rose in his heart. His feet suddenly landed on the ground, drawing two ravines on the ground. Armed domineering covered his arms. He hit Andrest with a punch on his blood-stained chest. Even if we were going to die, we had to die together. But at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared at a speed far beyond the reaction of the two of them. Between the two of them, this figure, one on the left and one on the right, grabbed Andrest's blade with his bare hands and let Trafalgar Law punch him in the back. He didn't move at all. And Lord Neiman! Andrest and Trafalgar Law exclaimed together. Really, Andre, we haven't seen each other for just a few days, and you're acting like this, Neiman complained somewhat unhappily, and then threw away Andrest's blade. Then, she turned her head and glanced at Trafalgar Law, whose face was full of disbelief. With a smile on her lips, she said, Trafalgar Law, this must be the first time we meet, right? Although he has never met Nima, Trafalgar Law, who had been a younger brother in the Don Quixote family for a period of time, recognized Nima immediately. Feel sorry, Trafalgar Law first put away his fists, and then said, yes, the first time we met. Andre. The name, Lord Orgrim's son? Andreist, though known to many across the sea, was the name of Orgrim's son. But Andrest's image and photos have almost never been circulated. In this regard, the Warhammer pirates protected quite well. Trafalgar Law, of course, had never seen what Andrest looked like. Before, I couldn't recognize it. It couldn't be wrong, after all, he just started calling Lady Neiman Aunt. Not paying attention to the injury on Andrest's chest, Neiman asked curiously, "Why did you two start fighting?" Andrest said unhappily, "Originally, that devil I had already grabbed the fruit, but this guy appeared out of nowhere and insisted on grabbing it from me, and then they started fighting." Who is he? Trafalgar Law, one of Dover's former subordinates. Neiman smiled and said. Once, Andrest raised his eyebrows slightly.